This is Tsurumi Station, about 10 minutes by train from Tokyo. Long ago, this entire area was a fishing village. Around 1913, the coastal areas were reclaimed, and a port deep enough for large ships was constructed. From then on, large factories were invited in, and people from all over Japan and abroad gathered here. This area became known as the Keihin Industrial Zone, once the very heart of Japanese industry. Along the coast, factories of all sizes stand in rows. Then as now, this has also been a town of immigrants. The train here connects residential areas with the industrial belt, and many foreign workers rely on it. The much-talked-about floating station on the sea from my previous video is actually the last stop of this line, link in the description. Unless your workplace happens to be along this route, few people, even Kanagawa locals, are aware of this train line. It was built entirely for workers, and the town grew to serve the factory labor force. Yet surprisingly, there are more places to explore here than most people know. This time, I'll ride this train to visit one of Japan's eeriest stations, and walk through a neighborhood built by immigrants from Okinawa, Korea, Brazil, Peru, and more. Please remember the clock. I will explain later. The once bustling shopping arcade has many shuttered shops since the COVID-19 pandemic. Okinawa, birthplace of karate, was once an independent kingdom called Ryukyu before becoming Okinawa Prefecture in 1879. Around 40 years later, between 1910 and 1926, about 40,000 Okinawans migrated here to work in the Keihin factories, forming a strong community. Even today, the area is nicknamed the Okinawa town of the Kanto region. At the time, impoverished tenant farmers in Okinawa suffered exploitation by mainland banks and institutions, a structure that lasted until World War II. This economic hardship drove many Okinawans to the mainland. The town still has Okinawan restaurants and several important dojos of Itosukai and Goju-ryu karate. While karate spread on the mainland mainly through university clubs, the oldest Goju-ryu dojo in mainland Japan was founded here in 1939. On a side note, Antonio Inoki, considered the father of Japanese pro wrestling and famous for his MMA bout with Muhammad Ali, under different rules from modern MMA, was born here. Inoki was not of Okinawan descent but migrated from this town to Brazil before returning to Japan as a pro wrestler. At the same time, Koreans, then under Japanese colonial rule, also migrated to Tsurumi and nearby towns. Like the Okinawans, they came as laborers, forced to take jobs in harsh, dirty, and dangerous industries that Japanese workers avoided, such as waste processing. Both Okinawans and Koreans often couldn't even rent rooms, so they were forced to form tight-knit communities, supporting one another. On September 1, 1923, the Great Kanto Earthquake struck. Because it hit around lunchtime, fires spread rapidly through collapsed houses, devastating Tokyo and surrounding prefectures. Deaths and missing persons reached over 105,000. Just 4 years earlier, on March 1, 1919, Korea had erupted in the largest independence movement under Japanese rule. Thousands of Koreans were killed, tens of thousands injured, while only a handful of Japanese casualties occurred. This was fresh in memory when the earthquake struck, and rumors spread wildly. Koreans are setting fires, and Koreans are poisoning wells. Newspapers even helped spread the lies. Self-defense militias formed, killing anyone suspected of being Korean with hooks or swords. In Chiba, even Okinawans and rural Japanese with strong accents were mistaken for Koreans and murdered. Tsurumi too became a site of this chaos. On September 2nd, a vigilante group brought 4 men to the Tsurumi police station, accusing them of poisoning wells. The men turned out to be Chinese, and the bottles they carried contained no poison. To prove it, Police Chief Tsunekichi Okawa drank the liquid on the spot. The vigilante group withdrew after seeing Okawa drink from 2 bottles of liquid, but people suspected of being Koreans were brought to the police one after another. Okawa gathered the residents and gave a speech to reassure them, but it had no effect, and so many Koreans were being brought in that the police station could no longer contain them. Okawa decided to move both the Koreans who had fled into the police station and those brought in by vigilantes to Sojiji Temple. However, by the following day, the situation had worsened even further. The vigilantes, armed with weapons, gathered at Sojiji Temple and demanded that the Koreans be handed over. Similar incidents occurred in Saitama Prefecture, where Koreans were dragged out and more than 80 were killed right in front of the police. Okawa ordered his officers to transfer the Koreans from Sojiji Temple to the Tsurumi police substation. Although they were moved to the station, crowds of vigilantes surrounded it, shouting for the Koreans to be killed. Okawa tried to persuade them, but the mob only grew more agitated, demanding that the police who sided with the Koreans be crushed. Still, mobs gathered, demanding the Koreans and Chinese in custody be handed over. Okawa stood firm, shouting, "If you wish to strike down Koreans, strike me first. Not a single one will be handed over as long as I live." The crowd was intimidated by Okawa's imposing presence. After a while, a representative stepped forward and asked how he would take responsibility if the Koreans were to escape. Okawa replied that in such a case he would commit seppuku to atone. Hearing this, the crowd dispersed. In total, Okawa and his 30 officers protected about 300 lives, 220 Koreans, 70 Chinese. In February 1924, a letter of gratitude from Koreans was delivered to Okawa. In 1953, a stone monument honoring Okawa was erected to the right of the main hall entrance of Tozenji Temple by the pro-North Korean organization, the United Democratic Front of Koreans in Japan, the predecessor of Soren. In 1927, the Tsurumi Okinawa Kenjin Doshikai, Okinawan Compatriots Association, was formed. Around 1930, the Okinawan Community Hall was opened. Labor disputes also arose against companies that declared no Ryukyuans or Koreans. At the time, Okinawans and Koreans were considered imperial subjects of Great Japan when obligations were imposed on them, but as soon as they tried to assert their rights, they were treated as outsiders. Today, the association has been renamed the Okitsuru Association, and on the first floor of this building, there are Okinawan restaurants and specialty product shops. In one Okinawan shop, there was habushu, traditional Okinawan liquor called awamori with a viper in the bottle. Here is awamori. It's super strong. Orion is an Okinawan beer brand. Every July, the Okitsuru Association also hosts matches of Okinawan grappling martial art kakariki. In 2025, this tournament will mark its 79th edition, making it the oldest such event held outside Okinawa. Near this building, there are even vending machines selling beverages only seen in Okinawa, making the area one where you can feel a touch of Okinawa while still on the mainland. In 1935, the Korean Workers' Alliance of Yokohama opened its labor hall. From 1939 onward, trafficking of Koreans began filling labor shortages, and in 1941, the Pacific War broke out. In Okinawa, the only ground battle fought on Japanese soil took place, claiming around 200,000 lives. In 1945, the war ended. Okinawa remained under American occupation until May 15, 1972. The currency was the US dollar. Traffic ran on the right side, as in the US, but Okinawans and residents of Okinawa still held Japanese nationality. Today, many Okinawan residents in this town run Okinawan restaurants or work in factories. On the other hand, after Japan's defeat, Koreans were stripped of Japanese nationality. Because of companies' non-payment of wages and government restrictions on taking property out of Japan, many could not return to Korea. It is said that 90% of them joined the League of Koreans in Japan, Zainichi Chosenjin Renmei, to demand collective bargaining and improved status from the Japanese government and companies. Initially, it had the character of a mutual aid organization, but it soon received support from Japanese communists, took on a stronger communist orientation, and later became the pro-North Korea organization So-Ren, General Association of Korean Residents in Japan. Those who had actively cooperated with the Empire of Japan during the war were branded as traitors to the people, and often could not return to their homeland. Within Japan, they were also targeted by the League. Around these individuals, Koreans who rejected communism formed rival organizations, eventually leading to the creation of the pro-South Korea organization Mindan. At the time, the U.S. occupation authorities, GHQ, used them as an anti-communist bulwark, and they even collaborated with Japanese right-wing groups. Thus, Koreans who remained in Japan were not divided into North Korean or South Korean based on their birthplace or ancestry, but rather on ideological grounds. They waged fierce struggles against each other within Japan. For details about this, even if you are not interested in karate, please watch this video, which clearly explains their position through the life of one individual. About 5 years after Japan's surrender, the Korean War broke out. Japan's economy rapidly recovered thanks to the special procurement boom, and war-torn Tokyo and other cities revived. However, Okinawa, being under U.S. occupation, did not benefit from this boom, and its full recovery only began after its reversion to Japan. Today, the two Korean organizations in Japan no longer engage in armed conflicts, and from the outside, they appear to maintain friendly relations. Many Koreans who remained in Japan made their living through small-scale scrap collection businesses. Even now, many nameplates on old houses in this area still show Okinawan and Korean names. In this area, the tendency is especially noticeable in buildings with an older construction history. In recent years, voices calling for stricter restrictions on immigrants' rights and increased surveillance have been rising across Japan to an unprecedented level. However, in this region, conflicts between Japanese people and immigrants are rarely heard of. The clock introduced at the beginning was a gift from Koreans who left this town for North Korea after the war. The plaque reads, "Wishing you all good health." At that time, among Koreans in Japan, many were hesitant to return to South Korea, where post-war recovery was slow and political instability under military dictatorship was rife. By contrast, North Korea was being heavily promoted as rapidly rebuilding under socialism, and many placed their hopes there. About 94,000 people ended up migrating to North Korea. In the system competition between socialist North Korea and capitalist South Korea, North Korea was then in the lead. So-Ren promoted North Korea as a paradise on earth, where food, clothing, and shelter were guaranteed, and Japanese leftists amplified this image by reporting on North Korea's economic development, encouraging Koreans in Japan to repatriate. However, a few years later, reports from Japan and South Korea revealed that those who had gone to North Korea were despised as the lowest class and suffered from famine. Families who had returned with wealth had their assets confiscated. They were forced to write letters to their families in Japan, demanding financial support, the unnatural wording making it clear they had been dictated. About 100,000 of those who were deemed useless for fundraising, along with their descendants, were sent to prison camps as political criminals and executed, together with escapees from North Korea. This clock was presented to the Japanese and Korean residents of Tsurumi, who had supported them before their departure, by those filled with hope for a new start in their homeland. Okinawan emigration overseas is said to have begun in 1899, when 27 people departed for Hawaii. The main reason appears to have been the extreme poverty of Okinawa at the time. But other factors also encouraged emigration abroad, the abolition of the land allotment system, which allowed people to freely sell land, the presence of emigration companies and migration leaders, and draft evasion, among other social circumstances. Between 1899, Meiji 32, and 1938, Showa 13, the total number of emigrants reached 72,134. When compared to the population of Okinawa Prefecture in 1940, this amounts to about 12% of the prefecture's population. After the end of World War II, immigration history entered a new stage, as families who had emigrated earlier sent for their relatives, and the Ryukyu government promoted migration policies. From the late 1980s, thanks to family networks with Okinawan roots, the number of immigrants arriving in this town from Latin America increased. This is my favorite Peruvian restaurant. In South America during the 1980s, the word Nikkei, people of Japanese descent, referred to Japanese emigrants and their descendants, and at that time working in Japan became a major trend. Especially from late 1986, there was a sharp rise in Nikkei workers going to Japan. This trend was further boosted by the 1989 revision of the Immigration Control Act and the 1990 introduction of the long-term resident status, which allowed up to third-generation descendants to work without restrictions. At that time, Japan was experiencing soaring stock and land prices, and these policies were intended to ease labor shortages. Based on family networks, communities of Nikkei South Americans formed. Many men started their own businesses in electrical contracting rather than factory work. From the early 1990s onward, South American restaurants began to increase in Tsurumi. Today, although their numbers have declined compared to the past, Peruvian and Brazilian restaurants, as well as supermarkets selling South American food, still remain. Walking through town, it's not unusual to hear Portuguese or Spanish. With the 1990 revision of the Immigration Control Act, second and third generation Nikkei, as well as their spouses, were granted resident statuses, such as spouse of Japanese national or long-term resident, that imposed no restrictions on employment. This made them the only legally recognized unskilled foreign workers in Japan. For the 350,000 Nikkei living in Japan, visa issues were generally not a problem. Officially, the Japanese government maintains a policy of not accepting foreign workers for unskilled jobs in manufacturing, construction, or services. However, Nikkei people were the only group indirectly legalized as such a labor force. Tsurumi Ward has the second largest foreign population in Yokohama City. Among them, South Americans account for about 40% of all foreign residents in the city. Now, those same Nikkei South Americans are, in turn, hosting young people from Southeast Asian countries who come to Japan under the Technical Intern Training Program, a system said to allow them to learn Japan's advanced skills. The station next to Tsurumi is sometimes called the creepiest station in the Tokyo metropolitan area, thanks to its unique atmosphere. At first glance, it might even look a bit unsafe, but in fact, the area is completely safe. It seems the building once housed real estate agencies and izakaya pubs. It now reminds me of a scene from a zombie apocalypse TV show. There is random graffiti here and there, but they don't seem to be affiliated with any gang or there for artistic purposes. and here a hidden space. This too looks like another entrance to the station building. Behind the station building, there is something. The uneven marks on the mid-level outer wall at the right front corner of the building are bullet holes left by strafing from Allied aircraft in 1945, at the end of World War II. Tsurumi is a town with many faces, scars of war, communities of historically marginalized people, a hero who saved many lives, delicious Okinawan and South American food, Okinawan martial arts rooted in the area, and, not far away, the photogenic station floating on the sea I introduced last time. With such easy access from Tokyo, this is definitely a place worth visiting at least once. Japan B is a channel that randomly shares information about lesser-known aspects of Japanese culture, spanning across various genres. The tree-dappled light is amazing. The water is crystal clear.
He's coming this way.
He is coming this way. When you're tired of the hustle and bustle of the city, you'll want to be soothed by the abundance of nature. In times like these, we recommend a picnic in Higashikurume.
Oh.
When people think of Tokyo, they usually imagine a futuristic skyline, crowded stations, and the constant noise of urban life. However, on the eastern edge of Tokyo, along the Edogawa River, lies a quiet town that still retains the atmosphere of the Edo period, Shibamata. Tokyo has many Japanese gardens, but few places offer the same level of grandeur, tranquility, and low foot traffic as this one. 3 major rivers flow through Tokyo. The Tama River, which separates Tokyo from Kanagawa Prefecture, and the Arakawa River, which cuts straight through Tokyo, are both heavily reinforced with concrete embankments. In contrast, the Edogawa River that flows through Shibamata is surrounded by nature, where skylarks sing and wild greenery thrives. Located at Tokyo's edge, just across the river from Chiba Prefecture, Shibamata is sometimes referred to as a landlocked island due to its limited public transportation options. But it is precisely this remoteness that has preserved the town's timeless charm. Compared to other tourist areas, you'll rarely see foreign visitors here. What remains is a strong sense of old downtown Tokyo culture and a gentle, unhurried pace of life. The Suidobashi, Karakuen, and Kasuga area, known as the sacred ground of judo, is also home to a concentration of martial arts and combat sports equipment stores, and is considered a mecca for Japanese boxing, pro wrestling, and kickboxing. What few people know is that within this neighborhood lies an area where time seems to have stood still since the Showa era. Beyond this small enclave, you'll find a rare sight in Tokyo, a shrine where rows of torii gates stand tall. Few people know that there is a town that seems to condense all of Tokyo's darkness. On the site of an Edo period execution ground, a giant Jizo statue, said to have silently witnessed as many as 200,000 executions, still stands quietly today. Yamada Asimon, who carried out beheadings here, gained enormous wealth. Nearby, rows of cheap inns house day laborers who, having been defeated in life, ended up in this town. In the adjacent block, where there was once a licensed red light district in the Edo period, pleasure industry businesses now stand side by side. This is a memorial monument for courtesans who had no relatives to claim their remains. This well marks the murder site of an Edo period serial killer samurai. In the middle of the town, a massive gas tank appears abruptly. On this bridge, several tragedies have occurred, and a memorial has been placed at its foot. Just behind one of Japan's most famous tourist destinations lies this town, filled with various loathed facilities and taboo sites. I walked through its streets,